Imagine this. You are alone inside a small metal submarine, slowly descending into an ocean made entirely of blood. It is completely dark outside. Not dark like deep water. Dark because blood is not transparent. You cannot see anything through the windows. No horizon. No movement. Nothing. The only way you know what's around you is through cameras and scanners that flash X-ray-like images, one still frame at a time. You have limited oxygen, a depth meter ticking down, a radio that connects you to people you cannot see. Chains above you are the only thing that can pull you back to the surface, and even those feel fragile. You are not here by choice. You are a prisoner, promised freedom if you complete this mission. Your job is simple. Go down, scan what's below, collect data, and come back alive. At first, everything feels mechanical. You follow instructions. You scan skeletons. You map the terrain. But then you notice something is wrong. Objects move between scans. Skeletons disappear. Something massive touches your submarine. And when you tell the control room, they don't believe you. As you go deeper, the radio becomes unreliable. Voices begin to change. Directions stop making sense. You start returning to the same locations again and again, even though you're sure you're moving forward. Time feels strange. Minutes pass, then suddenly days are gone. And the worst part is this. You begin to hear a voice that sounds human, calm, and familiar, guiding you toward a bright light you don't understand. You don't know if the voice is real. You don't know if the people above are lying. And you don't know if anything down here wants you alive. This is what Iron Lung feels like. Now, let's break down what's actually happening. When Simon first descends into the blood ocean, he sees almost nothing with his own eyes. The blood is so dense and dark that light cannot pass through it like water. Windows are useless. There is no visibility, no sense of direction, and no way to visually confirm what surrounds the submarine. From the very beginning, Simon is navigating blind. To compensate for this, the submarine is equipped with scanners and cameras that function more like an X-ray machine than a normal camera. Each time Simon activates the scanner, it sends out a burst of radiation that briefly passes through the blood and captures a still image of whatever lies outside the submarine. These are not live images. They are frozen frames, moments in time, which means Simon never sees movement directly. He only sees what was there when the scan occurred. This limitation becomes critical. When Simon scans the area, he initially sees skeletons scattered across the ocean floor. At first, they appear lifeless and ancient, suggesting previous explorers or victims. But as Simon takes more scans, he begins to notice something unsettling. Objects appear in one image and disappear in the next. The skeletons do not remain in the same position. This raises the first serious question. Either something is moving the remains, or something alive is moving among them. During this first descent, Simon also feels something massive brush against the submarine. There is no visual confirmation, only the physical sensation and the sudden change in pressure. When he scans again, he briefly captures an image of something with bright, reflective eyes staring directly toward the submarine. In the next scan, it is gone. This moment is important because it confirms that whatever is down there is not just large, but aware. When Simon reports this to the control room, they dismiss his concern. From their perspective, Simon is a prisoner who wants his freedom, and fear could be an excuse to end the mission early. They trust the data, not his interpretation of it. However, the scanner itself is not harmless. Each scan releases radiation, and when Simon accidentally activates the scanner while near the surface vessel, the radiation reaches the control room and injures Ava and several crew members. This confirms that the scanner is powerful, dangerous, and not just a passive observation tool. By the end of Simon's first descent, the movie establishes 3 crucial rules. First, nothing can be seen directly in the blood ocean. All information is delayed and incomplete. Second, the scanner cannot show motion, only evidence that something moved. And third, whatever is down there is not only alive, but already interacting with Simon, even before he understands it. After losing contact with the control room during his second descent, Simon is forced to operate the submarine completely on his own. With no instructions coming through the radio and no clear path back to the surface, he begins searching the interior of the submarine more carefully. That is when he discovers handwritten notes left behind inside the vessel. These notes are not explained directly, but their condition and placement strongly suggest they were written by a previous pilot who never returned. The notes contain fragmented instructions, warnings, and wiring information. Guidance meant for someone who would eventually end up in the same situation. These notes become Simon's only form of human guidance. They explain how to reroute power, reconnect systems manually, and follow navigation markers when external communication fails. This moment is important because it confirms that Simon is not the first person to lose contact, and that the submarine itself is designed to outlast its pilots. The mission was always expected to continue, even if the operator did not survive. Using the notes and the navigation system, Simon begins manually tracking his movement on a physical map. Each time he reaches a significant location, he marks it by pressing the submarine downward, anchoring his position, and recording the coordinates. This process allows him to slowly build a path through the blood ocean, but it also reveals something deeply unsettling. Despite moving forward, Simon keeps marking locations that overlap with previous points. The map shows that he is circling the same area repeatedly. As Simon follows the marked path deeper, the submarine suddenly begins to shake violently. Warning alarms activate, and a fire breaks out inside the vessel. Simon is forced to use a fire extinguisher to regain control, showing how fragile the submarine really is at this depth. Immediately after this incident, Simon takes another scan, and this time, the image reveals something unmistakable. He finds the remains of another submarine. This vessel is identified as SM-8, one of the earlier exploration units sent into the blood ocean. The damage is severe and concentrated on one side, as if the hull was torn open by immense force rather than crushed by pressure. This discovery is critical because it confirms that previous missions did not simply fail, they were destroyed. When Simon accesses SM-8's systems, the computer briefly powers on and displays warnings telling him not to proceed into restricted areas. The message feels less like an automated system and more like a final attempt to stop whoever finds it next. Despite this, Simon continues forward, marking the location of SM-8 on his map and pushing deeper into the ocean. This moment changes the mission entirely. Until now, Simon believed survival was still possible. The discovery of SM-8 proves otherwise. No one who went this deep came back alive. And yet, the mission continues. The strange computer messages and the second voice. When Simon accesses the damaged submarine SM-8, the onboard computer unexpectedly powers on. This moment is unsettling because the submarine appears dead, yet parts of it still function. The computer displays warning messages telling Simon not to proceed into restricted areas and not to continue deeper. These messages feel unusually personal, almost as if they are directed specifically at him rather than being generic safety alerts. However, Simon is not authorized to fully access the system. The data is locked behind credentials he does not have, reinforcing the idea that critical information was never meant to be seen by the pilots themselves. What makes this moment more disturbing is that the computer seems to react as Simon moves forward. The warnings escalate in tone, shifting from caution to something closer to a threat. This suggests that the system may be automated to protect the mission rather than the pilot, or that it is responding to conditions it was programmed to recognize but never explain. Either way, the computer does not offer clarity. It only confirms that Simon is going somewhere he was never supposed to reach. Soon after this, Simon begins hearing the second woman's voice over the radio. At first, she claims to be another pilot trapped in a damaged submarine, asking for help. Her voice sounds calm, human, and vulnerable, which immediately earns Simon's trust. Unlike mission control, she speaks directly to him, using emotional language instead of commands. She tells him where to go, gives him coordinates, and suggests that following her will reveal the truth. As Simon listens longer, the tone of her voice begins to change. She starts talking about light, destiny, acceptance, and sacrifice. Her instructions become less technical and more spiritual, guiding him toward a glowing location that does not exist on his map. The more Simon listens, the less control he seems to have over his own actions. His movements slow, his decisions become passive, and the submarine drifts forward as if pulled by something unseen. This is the clearest example of hypnosis in the movie. The voice does not force Simon physically. Instead, it overwhelms him mentally by replacing fear with calm and confusion with purpose. The moment Simon suddenly strikes the console and snaps out of it is critical. It proves that the influence is external and artificial, not his own thoughts. The illusion fully breaks when the voice says his name, Simon, something no one else should know. At that point, he understands that the voice is not a stranded human and not mission control. The combination of the computer's warnings and the hypnotic voice serves the same purpose. Both attempt to control Simon's behavior without explaining the truth. One uses restriction and authority. The other uses comfort and belief. And in the middle of both, Simon is left with no reliable source of reality. Simon's disappearance, the oxygen mystery, and time distortion. One of the most confusing moments in Iron Lung happens when Simon suddenly reestablishes contact with Mission Control and is told that he has been missing for several days. From Simon's perspective, this makes no sense. He does not experience days passing. To him, only a short amount of time seems to have passed, minutes or at most hours. Yet his oxygen level has dropped significantly, though not enough to match the amount of time Mission Control claims has passed. This creates a contradiction the movie never directly explains. If Simon was truly gone for several days, his oxygen should have been completely depleted. The fact that it is low but not empty suggests that time inside the blood ocean is not behaving normally, especially near the glowing light and the creature's territory. The most supported explanation is time distortion rather than simple time dilation. The movie does not show increased gravity or physical conditions that would cause scientific time dilation. Instead, it shows a breakdown of perception and continuity. Simon's body continues consuming oxygen, but not at a rate that matches real time. Meanwhile, his awareness of time becomes unreliable, as if parts of his experience are missing or overwritten. The mysterious light plays a central role in this. Every time Simon approaches it, his behavior changes. He becomes calmer, slower, and less aware of his surroundings. The light appears to function as a psychological and neurological trigger rather than a physical one. It draws Simon in, not by force, but by altering his mental state. This could explain why he does not experience the passage of time normally. His consciousness may be partially suppressed while his body remains active. Another theory suggested by the film is that the creature itself creates a zone where human rules do not apply. Near it, navigation loops, communication fails, and time becomes fragmented. Simon may not be traveling continuously through space at all. Instead, he could be repeatedly entering and exiting the same region without realizing it, losing large blocks of time in the process. There is also a darker implication. Previous pilots likely experienced the same thing. The notes, the repeated locations, and the presence of multiple skeletons all suggest that Simon's disappearance is not unique. The mission may have been designed with this behavior in mind, accepting time loss as part of the process. What the movie never confirms is whether Simon physically entered another space, a cave, or a different dimension. What it shows clearly is that when Simon is near the light and the creature, he is no longer fully in control of his own perception. Time does not stop. It simply stops making sense to him. This is why the control room's reaction is so cold. From their perspective, Simon returned after an impossible absence, alive but changed. And that uncertainty may be more dangerous than his disappearance itself. After Simon disappears for days and returns alive, the control room no longer sees him as a person to rescue, but as a risk. From their perspective, Simon survived conditions that should have killed him, spent time near the creature and the blood ocean, and may be mentally or biologically compromised. Bringing him back to the surface could endanger the remaining humans. At that point, the mission becomes more important than Simon's life. Ava may still care about him personally, but the higher command's priority is containment, observation, and data, not rescue. The final attack and death scene. Ava and Simon. As Simon descends one last time to retrieve the black box data from the damaged submarine, the situation becomes critical. His submarine, the SM-13, is failing under pressure, and the creature is closer than ever. This time, Ava promises Simon that if he returns from the cave with the data within 30 minutes, she will personally come down to save him. For the first time in the film, Simon is given real hope. True to her word, Ava boards another submarine, the SM-14, and descends into the blood ocean. However, the creature that has been stalking Simon shifts its attention to her. Over the radio, Simon hears Ava's voice change from calm authority to pure fear as she realizes she is being hunted. Unlike Simon, she has no time to adapt. The creature takes her submarine into its massive jaws, crushing the hull with overwhelming force. In her final moments, Ava does not panic. She uses the last seconds of her life to give Simon precise instructions, telling him exactly where the SM-13's black box is located and what he must do next. Her transmission cuts off abruptly as her submarine is punctured and destroyed. Ava dies instantly, leaving Simon completely alone. After hearing Ava's death, Simon finally understands the truth. There is no rescue coming. There never was. His survival is no longer the goal. Only the data matters. Accepting this, Simon decides to turn his death into a final act of purpose. As the SM-13 begins flooding with blood and strange biological matter, Simon's body is violently affected. The blood burns his skin, and parts of the submarine's interior seem to fuse with him as pressure and damage worsen. In a desperate moment, Simon is forced to tear off his own arm to free himself and reach the black box. This is not portrayed as heroic. It is brutal, painful, and inevitable. Simon secures the black box to a life vest so it can float to the surface after the submarine is destroyed. He then sabotages the SM-13's hull, ensuring that it will fail completely under extreme pressure. When the creature bites down on the submarine, the weakened hull collapses. The SM-13 implodes, killing Simon instantly. The explosion also severely damages and possibly destroys the creature that consumed him. The film ends with a quiet, haunting image. The black box rises through the blood ocean and reaches the surface, its beacon blinking steadily. Simon is gone. Ava is gone. But the data survives, and with it, the possibility that whatever remains of humanity may finally understand what destroyed them. The alien creature in Iron Lung is not just a physical predator, it is a psychological one. Long before it attacks Simon's submarine, it begins interacting with him through sound. The confusing radio voices Simon hears are not random hallucinations. The movie strongly implies that the creature can mimic human voices, specifically the voices of people who have already died in the blood ocean. This includes previous pilots and possibly even Ava's voice at certain moments. The reason these voices sound familiar, calm, and trustworthy is because they are designed to lower Simon's resistance rather than trigger fear. The creature does not communicate by threatening Simon. Instead, it imitates empathy and guidance. The voice claims to be trapped, claims to need help, and speaks about destiny, acceptance, and salvation. These are not technical instructions. They are emotional ones. This is how the creature gains influence. By speaking like a human and using spiritual language, it slowly replaces Simon's critical thinking with passive obedience. This is why Simon begins drifting toward locations that do not appear on his map, and why his movements slow, as if he is being guided rather than controlling the submarine himself. The glowing light Simon sees plays a crucial role in this manipulation. The movie never confirms that the light is supernatural, but its effect is undeniable. Every time Simon approaches it, his behavior changes. The light appears to function as a lure, drawing him closer, while the voice reinforces the idea that moving toward it is meaningful or inevitable. This combination of light and voice works like hypnosis. The light captures attention, and the voice provides justification. Simon does not feel forced. He feels chosen. This behavior closely mirrors how anglerfish hunt in the deep ocean. Anglerfish use a glowing lure to attract prey in complete darkness. The prey moves toward the light voluntarily, unaware that it is heading directly into danger. The creature in Iron Lung operates the same way, but on a psychological level. The light attracts. The voice reassures. By the time Simon realizes what is happening, he is already too close. The creature's ability to mimic voices likely comes from prolonged exposure to humans. Over multiple failed missions, it may have learned speech patterns, emotional cues, and even personal identifiers like names. This explains how the voice knows Simon's name and why it sounds convincingly human. It is not communicating to help him. It is communicating to guide him into its territory. In the final moments, the creature abandons subtlety. Once Simon secures the black box and sabotages the submarine, the creature attacks directly. When it bites the SM-13, it unknowingly triggers its own destruction. The weakened hull implodes under pressure, creating a violent collapse that kills Simon instantly and severely damages, or possibly kills, the creature itself. The irony is clear. The creature's final act of predation is what allows the mission's data to escape. In the end, the creature is defeated not by force or intelligence, but by sacrifice. It controlled Simon's mind, but it could not control his final choice. The light lured him in, but his death ensured the truth would rise to the surface.